you have your Bibles with you, please turn with me to Nehemiah chapter 5. I apologize. Like I said, my voice has been trying to go ever since before the wedding. I guess I've talked a little too much this week. Over the years, I have seen, as many of you have, the way Satan has attacked the church. You know, attacks coming from all outside. We're seeing it in our world today. Christians beheaded around the world. We've seen in China. We've seen in the former Soviet Union the persecution that came upon the churches. And a book came out years ago. I'm trying to think of the man's name that was the founder of Voice of the Martyrs. But he wrote a book called Tortured for Christ. And he talked about growing up and seeing what was happening under the Nazi regime. And as Hitler came into parts of Russia and into Romania and began to attack. And the thing that he didn't see happen in Poland and Romania and some of these places, even under Hitler, was an attack on Christianity. He said that actually once Germany was defeated and Russia took over, that's when the serious attack came on the church. You never would have thought that, but he said that it was actually better for Christianity in those areas for them to be under the Nazis than it was for them to be under the Russians. So they went through severe persecution during that time, and we've seen an increased persecution on the church around our world. And it's a persecution that's been going on for years, but the church has continued to flourish in the midst of persecution. In China, the church continued to grow under persecution. In Russia, the church continued to grow under intense persecution. We've seen it in the Sudan. We've seen it happen in Arab countries where people are being beheaded. The church continues to grow under this enormous persecution. So, as we've been looking at Nehemiah, we've talked about how all of those elements on the outside were trying to stop the work that Nehemiah and the Israelites were trying to do. They were trying to put a halt to God's work, to God's rebuilding of the city, of God's rebuilding of His people. And none of the attacks from the outside ever stopped the work, ever really had a serious effect on them. They become more determined every time. And that's the way it's been with the church throughout the centuries. As persecution come upon the church grew. The church dug in more and were more determined to get the word out and to stay faithful. It was in the lack of persecution that the church usually begins to dwindle. And whereas attacks from the outside have never, in all of these centuries, attacks from the outside have never been able to destroy the church, the attacks from within have. And when the enemy can't defeat the church from the outside, he'll move into the pews. He'll move inside the church and he'll begin to destroy it. I've seen church after church after church split and shut the doors because of stuff going on inside the church. Had absolutely nothing to do with what's going on the outside of the church. This morning's message is entitled, When the Enemy Attacks. If you have your Bibles with you, please turn with me to Nehemiah chapter 5. Nehemiah chapter 5. And once you found that, if you would, please stand in reverence for the reading of God's Word. Now you'll remember that last week we talked about the fact that they had reached a point they were fearful of the enemy attacking, and they basically had a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other, trying to rebuild. But they did not. They did not stop. They continued to work. Chapter 5, verse 1. And there was a great outcry of the people and their wives against their Jewish brethren. For there were those who said, we, our sons and our daughters are many. Therefore, let us get grain that we may eat and live. There were also some who said, we have mortgaged our lands and vineyards and houses that we might buy grain because of the famine. There were also those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our lands and vineyards. Yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our children as their children, and indeed we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been brought into slavery. It is not in our power to redeem them, for other men have our lands and our vineyards. And I became very angry when I heard their outcry in these words. After serious thought, I rebuked the nobles and rulers and said to them, each of you is exacting usury from his brother. So I called a great assembly against them. And I said to them, according to our ability, we have redeemed our Jewish brethren who were sold to the nations. Now, indeed, will you even sell your brethren? Or should they be sold to us? Then they were silenced and found nothing to say. Then I said, what you are doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? I also, with my brethren and my servants, am lending them money and grain. Please let us stop this usury. Basically, this usury means a high interest. Restore now to them even this day their lands, their vineyards, their olive groves, and their houses. Also 1/100 of the money and the grain, the new wine and the oil that you have charged them. So they said, we will restore it and will require nothing from them. We will do as you say. Then I called the priest and required an oath from them that they would do according to this promise. Then I shook out the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out each man from his house and from his property who does not perform this promise. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen, and praise the Lord. Then the people did according to the promise. Moreover, from the time that I am appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the governor's provisions. But the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Yes, even their servants bore rule over the people, but I did not do so because of the fear of God. Indeed, I also continued the work on this wall, and we did not buy any land. All my servants were gathered there for the work, and at my table were 150 Jews and rulers, besides those who came to us from the nations around us. Now that which was prepared daily was an ox and 6 choice sheep. Also fowls were prepared for me, and once every 10 days an abundance of all kinds of wine. Yet in spite of this, I did not demand the governor's provisions, because the bondage was heavy on this people. Remember me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. Father, as we come before you this morning, Lord God, may we take a real close look at ourselves. Father, in this story we see how the Jewish people, how the nobles were treating their own people as bad or even worse than the Gentiles, their own enemies, were treated. Father, may we realize that, as Nehemiah pointed out, Father, our testimonies are at stake. Or what other people see us doing matters. How they see us treating one another and how they see us treating others. Or it tells people what kind of a Christian we are and what kind of a church we are. So Father, I just pray that today, Lord, our ears will be open and our hearts attentive to your word. Lord God, may you touch each one this morning with your message. Lord, we ask and pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. Now, as we see in this, along with intense opposition from the outside, now Nehemiah is facing internal strife from the inside. First thing I want to look at this morning, I've got good news. I've only got 2 points this morning, but I got 3 pages. The first thing is Nehemiah's problem. There's a famine. It's a drought. Nothing's growing. And just some areas where there may be some irrigation, there may be a little bit of growth, but there's not a lot of food. There's a famine going on at this time. Crops have not produced as they should, and so the people have been low on food for some times. There's also, they're dealing with inflation. Of course, we know, like I was joking about the hee-haw tickets, when the supply goes down and demand goes up, the price goes up. And that's where they were at this point. There was a serious inflation, and they were charging each other more for their services and goods. So due to the greedy merchants taking unfair advantage of the situation, they raised prices so that the people had to pay more. The people had been taking time off work to rebuild the walls. See, we don't think about that when we read this, the fact that they took all of this time to rebuild the walls. Imagine taking 50-something days off from work that you don't get paid to go and work, at the church. I mean, you got to imagine, me and the deacons come up here and say, look, we got a lot to do around the church. Could you just take off of work for, 3 months, 2 months, maybe 2 months, and just come up here to church and work? You're not going to get paid during that time, but just come up here and work. It wouldn't be many people show up. Because people have to be able to make a living. You have to pay your bills. Just because you quit work doesn't mean your bills quit coming in. Same way with these people. The needs were still there. They still had families to provide for. So they've had to walk away from everything. They've had to walk away from their jobs, everything, because all of their focus is on building this wall and protecting the people from attacks during this time. So again, they've taken this time off. The people were having to neglect their income-paying job to build on the walls. There was also a heavy taxation they were dealing with. Add to this the fact that the Persian monarchs were known for imposing heavy burdens upon the people, all for the personal enrichment of the king. Basically, the situation was the people who did not own land had no way to produce food. Those who were merchants, those who were builders, they had no way to produce food. They had no land. But the people who had land were unable to produce crops because there was a famine. So even the ones who had land, they still were having difficulty trying to produce crops. And they were having to mortgage their property to buy food and to pay the taxes on the land that they had. Some were forced to borrow from the rich nobles at a high interest to pay these taxes to the Persian monarchs. Just because you don't have a job don't mean the taxes quit coming. It didn't in this day, it doesn't in our day. The taxes are still there. Well, they had to pay these taxes, so they went to their brethren to borrow money. Now, the Jewish people were not allowed to charge a usury like this. They were not allowed to charge a high interest. But guess what? That's exactly what they were doing. These rich nobles were charging them an enormous amount. They were taking advantage of the situation. But what is so sad is they were taking advantage of their own people. As Nehemiah said, we went through all of this to get our people freed from the monarchs and get them back here just so we could put them under our burden. Something's bad wrong with that picture. And that's what he's trying to point out to them. So again, you had some that were having to borrow money to try to pay the interest. And those who couldn't repay, the nobles were actually forcing them to sell their children to them in slavery. Now, you got to stop and think about this. You've been called. You know God has called you to do this work. You know you have an obligation to do this. And in the process of this, you got people beating you down. You got people taking advantage of you. You're already suffering. You're already sacrificing to be able to do the work that God's called you to do. But now you've got your own people beating you down, taking advantage of you. And can you imagine even taking your own children as payment on debts that you owed? I mean, imagine that inside of your church, that you borrowed money, had to borrow money from someone to buy food, and you couldn't pay it back, and they took your child as payment. That's basically what this translates to. This is what the Jewish people were doing. The rich nobles were actually taking their children as slaves. And then there were the rich nobles who were actually taking advantage of their brethren and treating them no better than their enemies. They had lent them money at exorbitant rates. They had confiscated their lands. They had cheerfully accepted their sons and daughters from poor families as slaves. The root cause of this problem was selfishness. And of course, the root cause of most internal conflict and discord is selfishness. Whenever there's discord, whenever there's disharmony, selfishness is at the root of it. I want what I want, or I want my way, or I want what, it's all about me. It's never about God. It's always about what I want, what I can get. When the enemy is unable to destroy the work of God from the attacks on the outside, he will attempt to do so by spreading seeds of discord on the inside. He will attempt to do it by infiltrating into the church, and he'll begin to whisper in people's ears. He will begin to sow these little seeds of discord. People will become disenfranchised. They'll become unhappy with the way things are. Again, he'll come inside and spread these seeds. Most churches that close their doors today do not do so because of attacks from the world, but because of disharmony and discord on the inside of the church. You think about it. We're seeing churches all around closing their doors. And it has absolutely nothing to do with an attack of the world. That they've come in, the government's come in and shut them down, or the government's come in and overtaxed them. It's because of what's taking place on the inside of the church. Bickering, backbiting, kill more churches. People going back and forth with each other, bickering about every little thing. That shouldn't take place in God's house. I'm sorry. There's never an excuse for it. And most of the time, the bickering and the backbiting has absolutely nothing to do with anything biblical or doctrinal. It goes back to the selfishness. What I want. What I can get. I want it my way. All that little bickering and backbiting. I've seen more churches destroyed because of the bickering and the backbiting. There's never an excuse for the backbiting. Going and talking behind somebody's back. Saying one thing to their face and saying something else when you're away from them. All of that backbiting going on. That's why a lot of people have left churches. That's one of the number one things I deal with as a pastor when I talk to people and invite them to come to church, and they talk about, well, I used to go to such and such church, but it just seems like everybody's always fighting or everybody's always talking about each other. And it may just be an excuse, but it's very accurate most of the time. Unfortunately. See, people are looking for excuses not to go to church. The problem is church don't need to be giving them excuses. They don't need to find excuses from us. Again, when Satan can't destroy from the outside, he does it from the inside. Bickering, backbiting amongst the people, complaining. There, as my grandpa used to say, there's some people that's going to gripe and complain if you hung them with a new rope. Some people look for things to complain about. And it's been, I've noticed over the years that the ones that are complaining are usually the ones that are doing the least. They're not doing anything to help the situation. They just want to complain about something. We shouldn't be complaining. It bothers me when you walk into the church and the first thing you start hearing is people, how are you doing? Man, everything's bad. Or why is this like this and why is this like that? Start complaining about stuff in the church. Look, get on board and help. Get on board and work with us. One person can't do it all. And like I said, the one complaining the loudest is usually the one doing the least. Amen? You look around, that's what you're going to see. So again, bickering, backbiting. Satan will use that. He'll use complaining. He'll use gossiping. I want to tell you something. You may not know this. I had a lady tell me one time, she'd like to come and tell me what everybody was gossiping about. You ever wonder how she knew what everybody was gossiping about? She'd come talk to me about what everybody was going. Did you know? Now, when you come tell the preacher, it's not gossiping, it's just letting him know. It's more spiritual when you tell the preacher. So she was coming to tell the preacher, well, did you know such and such, and did you know that? And I said, look, she said, all this gossiping going on. I said, do you understand that if you don't give an ear, they don't have anybody to talk to? I said, you're just as guilty as they are. Well, no, I just came and told you. I didn't tell you. I said, but why did you listen to them? Why didn't you shut them down? Well, I didn't want to be rude. Now, she didn't want to miss some gossip. She's afraid she might miss some juice. Gossiping tears churches apart. There doesn't need to ever be any gossiping, talking about somebody behind their back, judging someone, calling somebody else, and getting everybody else on board with it. There's never an excuse for that inside the church. And like I said a minute ago, you may not be aware of this, but if somebody will gossip to you, they're going to gossip about you. Don't think that you're the only one that they're talking to, because they'll turn around and call little Miss McGillicuddy on the phone and say, well, I was just talking to so-and-so, and you know what she had to say about this, and it's going to go right on down the line. So if she'll gossip, and I keep saying she, men are just as bad. But if they'll gossip to you, they'll gossip about you. The things that are destroying churches, it cause disharmony and discord on the inside, bickering, backbiting, complaining, gossiping, favoritism. There should be no favoritism in the church. I don't care if a person makes $200,000 a year or if somebody makes $10,000 a year. They shouldn't be treated any different. We have a lot of prejudice in the churches today. And I'm not just talking about racial prejudice, I'm talking about social prejudice. I have dealt with this my entire ministry. Churches I have been in and would reach out and, well, we don't want that element in the church. I told you probably a year and a half ago about a ministry. I took a youth group and we went to a trailer park up in the Delta, and man, we ministered for a week. Man, our kids come back on fire. It was a very impoverished trailer park, and they come back completely changed. Never were the same after that. Seeing, what it really meant to see people struggle and to know that they had a part in helping. And it made the biggest difference. I know two of the girls, they were sitting there, they talk about that they live, these two girls talk about living in the ghetto of Madison. Ghetto, yeah. I said, child, you don't know what ghetto is, But they talk about living in the poor section of Madison, and always complaining because their parents didn't buy them the type clothes, and they had to have this name brand and this name brand. Well, we took a lot of clothes, and seeing some of these kids, they were seeing girls their age going through these clothes, and one of them come back and said, my mama said we weren't going to be able to afford new clothes for school this year. And these two girls broke down and started crying and said, I complained because my parents weren't getting me the name brand stuff. And she said, these kids are getting clothes that are not new, but in their eyes are new. And they're praising God for them. It really had an impact. I was so pumped up. We came back. We're going to do this. Man, we got a trailer park on each end beyond our church. And I said, man, we can do the same thing here. And I got shut down because they said, we don't want that element in the church. That's inexcusable. Because who am I to judge who God reaches out to and who God doesn't? God doesn't look at your income. You may have 10,000 pounds of gold sitting in a safe somewhere. You take it to heaven, all it is street patch. It's not good for anything. Your money doesn't get you anywhere. God doesn't look at that, and neither should we. There doesn't need to be any favoritism, social favoritism. The bank president should be set right next to the garbage collector. It doesn't make any difference. And it destroys churches when that quits happening, because they lose the spiritual nature then. I told you I had one of my pastors, a man that I looked at, my very first pastor after I got saved. Looked up to this man, He always preached what I'm saying right here. And then one morning we had a multi-millionaire, very famous multi-millionaire, show up in the congregation, and he liked to knock two little old ladies down going down the aisle and try to shake his hand and invite him back to church. And come to the deacons and told every one of us that we needed to go and introduce ourselves and ask him to come back, because do you realize what he could do for our church? I lost all respect, because what he was saying wasn't real. We need to make sure there's no social prejudice. Whoever is welcome at God's table. There doesn't need to be social, racial, or generational prejudice when it comes to God's table. It destroys churches. Slothfulness is another thing. Slothfulness in our work. It's inexcusable for us to be slothful when it comes to serving God. If we give God our best at our job, why should we come to church and give Him anything less than our best? In our spiritual life, why do we give Him whatever's left over? You go back and you look, everybody was always called to bring their first fruits. We give God whatever's left over. God should get the very first, not just of our finances, but of us. We should give God the very best we have in everything we're doing. If you teach in Sunday school class, you need to give God your very best. You need to study, you need to prepare. You know, if you're cleaning up around the church, you need to give God your best. You know, whatever it is that you're doing, you should give God 100%, not whatever's left over. There should be no slothfulness. Slothfulness. Satan will use slothfulness to destroy a church. He will use apathy to destroy a church and to separate God's people. People become apathetic in worship. They become apathetic in attendance. They become apathetic in their service. And the church begins to dwindle. We'll use all kinds of excuses on why we can't be there, why we can't work, why we can't serve, why we can't attend. We become apathetic in our service. We become apathetic in our walk. So we've seen what the problem is. Now let's look at the solution. Number 2, the solution we see is, first of all, Nehemiah addressed the issue. Too many times we want to rake the issues under the rug. We don't want to deal with it. You know, we think out of sight, out of mind. But just because it's out of sight don't mean that it's not still there doing something. You can only put stuff under a carpet so long before it's going to raise up high enough to trip over it. You need to deal with it. You need to address it. He went and immediately appealed to the nobles, and he appealed to them on several levels. Number 1, he appealed to the morality of their actions. Look at verses 7 and 8. He said, after serious thought, I rebuked the nobles and rulers and said to them, each of you is extracting usury from his brother. So I called a great assembly against them, and I said to them, according to our ability, we have redeemed our Jewish brethren who were sold to the nations. Now indeed will you even sell your brethren? Or should they be sold to us? Then they were silenced and found nothing to say. He appealed to the morality of their actions. That's the first thing we need to look at. Are our actions justified in the things that we do today? You know, is it justified? You know, can we bring that before God and say, okay, you know, me being apathetic, is that justified? You know, me being prejudiced, is that justified? And I'm going to tell you, let's get back, I want to go just real quick, right back on what we was talking about a second ago with the favoritism and the prejudice part of it. Do you realize that most of the churches that have closed in Jackson, most of our Baptist churches, have been because they refuse to reach out to a changing community? That's just what completely got me. When I was working I was on the church planting department with the Metro Baptist Association, was serving with them. We had churches that were voting and they were trying to decide, well, our neighborhoods are transitioning. So we need to vote and decide if we're willing to reach out to anybody in our community, regardless of color, regardless of anything. We're going to reach out to anyone, or would we rather shut our doors? And time again, they voted that they would rather shut their doors than to reach out to the community that was around them. That wasn't a church. That was a social club. They wouldn't even turn around and try to bring in a pastor, an African-American pastor that could come in alongside of the pastor to help transition, to help him reach the community. They decided they'd rather just sell the church and not even. And you realize we have several churches in the Jackson area that used to be Southern Baptist that are now a black non-denominational church because a white Baptist church refused to transfer over and allow it to become a black Southern Baptist church. Still a black church, but now it's just not Southern Baptist. It's some other denomination. We lost our Southern Baptist influence in Jackson because churches refused to transition over. There's a problem. Why are churches closing their doors? This is one of the issues of why we've lost so many churches. We've talked about it time and time again through the Metro Association of what's happening. We're losing, and we are not just losing, we have lost our Southern Baptist influence in the city of Jackson because our churches are closing left and right. I love what Brother Jeff said over at Southside. He's hung in there, and they continue to reach out over there. And Jeff said, you know what? He said the Metro Baptist Association and the Baptist churches in this area that are willing to shut their doors rather than reach out to the community that's transitioning, they don't need to send another dime to the Southern Baptist Convention to send missionaries overseas if they will not reach the people right here in their own community. And I agree. I had a black pastor made a statement here a while back. He was from Africa. He was speaking at the World Missions Banquet. And there was a guy standing there, and he was telling them about how much money his church was sending overseas to his country. And he said, well, he said, I got a question for you. He said, why are y'all sending all that money over there? And he said, well, what do you mean? He said, is it because you're really wanting to help, or you figure if you keep them there, they won't come to your church? He had a legitimate question. People are looking at the church today. They need to see something different than what they've been seeing. They're looking at churches around our nation today, and that's why the church is losing its influence. We need to be standing up and doing it better than everybody else. Again, he appealed to their morality. He appealed to their witness in verse 9. He said, to other countries, our enemies are watching us. What are they seeing? You know, we've talked about how wrong it is for the enemies to take our people and to charge them all these taxes and to put our people in slavery, and then we get our people back and we do it to them. We don't treat them any different. And that's what Nehemiah is trying to tell them. He said, you've lost your witness. So many times the churches lose their witness because of the way they act and the things they do. We need to realize people are watching us just like the nations were watching Nehemiah. They were watching the Jewish nation to see what they were going to do. People are watching us. They're watching Bethesda. They're watching me. They're watching you. They're watching churches all over our area. And they're wanting to see how we're doing things. And if we're actually living what we're preaching. And if we're not, they're going to call us on it every time. And they ought to. We need to protect our witness and make sure that we're living out there what we claim to be living in here. When people see you on the street, they need to see the same person on Monday through Saturday that they see Sunday at church. There doesn't need to be any difference. How are people seeing you? How is your witness? He appealed to their compassion. He pointed out in verse 10, he said, I also, with my brethren and my servants, am lending them money and grain. Please let us stop the usury. Let us stop the interest. Have compassion. We need to have compassion on those around us, those that are hurting, those inside of our congregation, but also those outside of our congregation. We need to be compassionate when we're dealing with people. We need to have a heart for people. So he deals with their compassion. He appealed to them to make restitution in verse 11. Tell them, whatever you've done wrong, you need to make it right. If you've wronged someone, you need to go to that person and you need to make it right to that person. You need to tell that person, I was wrong. There's times that I make mistakes. And I have to swallow my pride and say, I made a mistake. That's something I've always tried to do with my children. I'm not going to stand here and say I'm the best parent in the world. I have made a lot of mistakes. But when I do, I always step up and say, I messed up. You know, they know that I'm not perfect. They also know that I'm not too proud to say that this was my fault. We need to make restitution. When we do something wrong, we need to go to that person and we need to try to make it right to restore that relationship. So again, he appealed to the morality of their actions. He appealed to their witness, to their compassion. He appealed to them to make restitution. He also appealed to the nobles to seal their commitment with an oath. Now, the New Testament pretty much teaches us that this is not something we need to do. We don't need to seal something with an oath. In James chapter 5, verse 12, it says, My brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment. When you make an oath, you're setting yourself up for judgment if you fall short of that oath. But we need to let our yes be yes and our no be no. People need to know that your word amounts to something. That doesn't happen anymore. That's one of the saddest states about where we're at today in our world. Used to, if somebody told you they were going to do something, they did it. You never even questioned it. If you borrowed money from somebody, you didn't have to have a contract. They shook hands on it. You made a commitment there, a handshake, and it was taken care of. Today, people say stuff, they'll make commitments and never follow through, and they don't even think about it. We need to let our yes be yes and our no be no. When we make a commitment, when we say we're going to do something, we need to follow through if at all possible. And that's something I always try to tell people. You know, I commit to this. I will be there. I will do this unless something beyond my ability rises up to prevent it. And then I'm going to let them know that. Because sometimes circumstances do come up. But we need to be people, as Christians, we need to be people who keep our word. When we make a commitment to our families, when we make a commitment to other people, to our church family, or those out in the world, we need to be known as men and women of integrity who live up to our commitments. And lastly, in verses 14 and 19, we see Nehemiah set the example. He said, I could legally have taken all this food, all this stuff that came into me, but I didn't, because I knew it was going to place a heavier burden on someone else. And he took what he did have and he provided for those in need. Nehemiah set the example. As a leader, he set the example of what it meant to serve. Christians, we need to set the example. You've got children who are watching you. You need to set the example. You've got young people in this church. Whether you've got children or not, you've got children in this church who are watching you. As a pastor, I've gotten tired over the years of having to try to explain to kids why that deacon that they respect, or that Sunday school teacher they respect, or that person in the church they respect, why they act a different way when they're away from church. And I've had to do that for many, many, many years. Just broke my heart. I had a boy one day tell me this deacon, he thought this deacon just walked in the clouds. That he just was almost perfect. And he went to work for him one summer, he was thinking, he said, this is going to be the best job in the world. I'm going to be working with a godly man in a godly place. After about 2 weeks, he came in, walked in there and sat down, and he said, can I talk to you, Brother Hoyt? I said, yeah. And tears came up in the boy's eyes, and he said, I sat out there on the job and listened to him cussing his employees. And he said, and he goes down, and I see him at the altar with tears in his eyes, praying and stuff, and putting on a big show at church. And he said, I believe it's all a lie. I don't believe any of it now. People are watching. We need to set the example. Our kids are watching. The kids in this church are watching. The young people in this church are watching. We need to be setting an example. You need to be a mentor, and you are a mentor to people around you, whether you want to be or not. People are looking towards you. We need to set the example. Nehemiah didn't just lay it out there and say, this is what you need to do. He led by example. People are going to pay more attention to what we do than what we say. That's what's going to matter. We can talk it up all we want to, but are our actions matching up with our words? That's what people are watching. We need to make sure that they see us not just talking the talk, but they see us walking the talk, that we're following up with what we say. Let's pray. Father, I just ask you to be with us during this invitation time. Father, I ask for you to please speak to hearts. Lord, I pray, Father, that we will see how much damage can be done inside of the church when the enemy is allowed to run loose. And Father, the enemy uses people. He uses the desires of people. He uses the personal wants of people. So Lord, I just pray right now, Lord God, that each and every person under the sound of my voice will make a commitment this morning that, Lord, they're going to commit everything that they are and everything they have to you. That, Lord God, they're going to seek your will in all their decisions and all they do. And Lord, please be with us during this invitation time. Lord, if there's anyone here this morning that doesn't know you as Lord and Savior, if there's anyone here this morning that has been struggling in their Christian walk, and Lord, they're saying, I want to be that example. I've been doing some of these things, and I want to recommit. I want to get my life back on track. I want to be the man, or I want to be the woman of God that He desires me to be. And Lord, please speak to them during this invitation. Lord God, may they make that commitment during this time. Now, Lord, again, we just ask that you speak to our hearts. May your Spirit move freely during these moments. And we ask and pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you please stand? During the invitation, there's going to be no songs. There's going to be music playing, heads bowed, eyes closed. As the music plays, allow God to speak to you. This music is a song that you know well, just as I am. God accepts us just as we are, but He loves us far too much to leave us that way. If there's anything that you need to change this morning, please don't leave here without doing it.